In a bustling company nestled in the heart of the city, there worked a man named Amos, a typist with a physique that could rival a sculpted statue. His muscles seemed to ripple effortlessly as he typed, drawing occasional admiration from his colleagues. Despite his impressive build, Amos was a humble man, dedicated to his family, a loving wife and their young son, who was just starting school. Amos was known for his discipline. Every morning, he arrived at the office before sunrise, setting up his desk and ensuring everything was in place before the workday began. His punctuality did not go unnoticed, especially by his boss, a striking woman in her late 30s named Clara. Clara was a woman of influence, respected for her sharp mind and commanding presence, yet she harbored a secret, her growing admiration for Amos. At first, Clara merely observed Amos from afar, captivated by his diligence and demeanor. Over time, however, admiration turned into desire, and Clara found herself wanting more than just a professional relationship with him. She was determined to make him her confidant, and perhaps more. One morning, as Amos worked diligently at his desk, the sound of Clara's sharp heels echoed down the corridor. Stopping at the security station, she called for one of the guards. "Bring Amos to my office immediately," she instructed curtly, her voice leaving no room for questions. The security guard, a man named Thomas, nodded and descended the stairs to Amos's office. Reaching the door, he knocked lightly. "Come in," Amos's deep voice called. Thomas stepped inside, finding Amos engrossed in his work. "The boss wants to see you in her office right now," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes reflecting mild curiosity. Amos looked up, startled. "Me? In her office?" "Yes," Thomas confirmed. Amos hesitated, a wave of worry washing over him. It was unusual for Clara to summon him, and he couldn't think of anything he might have done wrong. Setting his work aside, he rose from his chair, adjusted his tie, and followed Thomas toward the upper floors. Each step Amos took seemed heavier than the last, his mind racing with questions. Reaching Clara's office, he paused in front of the door. Taking a deep breath, he knocked softly. From inside, Clara's smooth voice called out, "Come in." The door creaked open, and Amos stepped inside, unsure of what awaited him. Amos stepped into Clara's office, his heart pounding in his chest. Clara, sitting behind her sleek wooden desk, smiled warmly as she rose. Her heels clicked softly against the floor as she walked toward him, her gaze steady and intense. Amos, unsure of what to expect, felt a wave of fear wash over him. When she reached him, Clara placed her hands gently on his shoulders. Before he could react, she leaned in and kissed his forehead. Amos froze, his cheeks burning with shame and confusion. "Amos," Clara said softly, her voice smooth and persuasive. "I've been watching you for some time now. Your dedication, your work ethic, your presence, it's impossible to ignore." Amos swallowed hard, unable to find words. Clara tightened her grip on his shoulders. "I know you're my employee, but I can't hide my feelings any longer. I have feelings for you, Amos. And I want you to be more than just my worker, I want you to be my partner. My secret partner." Amos blinked, his mind reeling. "To show you how serious I am," Clara continued, her tone turning persuasive, "I'm willing to offer you something most can only dream of. If you agree to be my side chick, I'll give you a stake in this company. A chance to secure a future not just for yourself but for your family." The promise caught Amos's attention. For a moment, he imagined the opportunities such wealth could bring, better education for his son, a better life for his family. But guilt immediately crept in as he thought of his wife and the life they had built together. "Madam," Amos finally said, his voice low, "this is unexpected. I'll need some time to think about it. Can I get a few hours?" Clara smiled, seemingly satisfied with his response. "Of course, Amos. Take your time. But don't keep me waiting too long." Amos nodded, stepping back and excusing himself. As he walked back to his office, his thoughts swirled chaotically. The proposition was tempting, but the implications were overwhelming. When the workday ended, Amos packed up his things and left for home, his usual confidence replaced by confusion. He arrived home, greeted by his cheerful son and caring wife. But even their warmth couldn't ease his troubled mind. "Amos, is something wrong?" his wife asked, noticing his unusual demeanor. "It's nothing," Amos replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a headache. I'll be fine." His wife frowned but chose not to press further. They shared dinner in relative silence, and later that night, Amos lay awake, replaying Clara's words in his mind. The next morning, he woke up early, determined to face the situation head-on. He dressed impeccably, adjusting his tie in the mirror before kissing his son and wife goodbye. As he walked into the office building, Amos felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. Whatever decision he made today would alter his life forever. As Amos stood outside his office door, reaching for the handle, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Startled, he pulled it out and saw Clara's name flashing on the screen. Hesitating for a moment, Amos finally answered, his voice low. "Hello, madam." "Amos," Clara said, her voice smooth and commanding. "Before you start your work today, I want you to come to my office. I have something important to discuss." "Yes, madam," Amos replied, his heart racing. He stood outside his office for a moment, debating whether to ignore the call or comply. Eventually, he decided to go to Clara's office, knowing her influence over his position and the offer she had made the previous day. When Amos knocked on Clara's door, her voice called out, "Come in." He opened the door and stepped inside, only to be greeted by Clara rushing toward him. Without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed him deeply, catching Amos off guard. He stood frozen, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. "Amos," Clara said, pulling away slightly but still holding his arms, "sit down. I've been waiting to hear your decision about what we discussed yesterday." Amos hesitated before sitting down across from her, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Well?" Clara asked, leaning forward with anticipation. "What's your decision?" Amos took a deep breath. "Madam, I've thought about it. I've decided to accept your offer. I'll agree to this relationship to safeguard my job and for the opportunities you've promised." Clara's face lit up with excitement. She clapped her hands together and jumped out of her chair. "I knew you'd make the right choice, Amos," she exclaimed, her voice filled with joy. Before Amos could respond, Clara continued, "You won't be doing your usual work today. I've already decided we'll spend the day together. Call it a celebration of our new arrangement." Amos nodded, unsure of how to react. Clara picked up her phone and dialed her driver. "Get the car ready," she instructed. "We are going to the nearby Greenfield restaurant." Turning back to Amos, she smiled. "Prepare yourself, Amos. We are going to enjoy the day and the night together." A few minutes later, the company car pulled up in front of the building. Clara and Amos stepped inside, and the driver headed toward the restaurant. The journey was filled with Clara's enthusiastic chatter, while Amos sat quietly, still processing the gravity of his decision. When they arrived at the Greenfield restaurant, the lush greenery and serene environment surrounded them. Clara stepped out first, extending her hand toward Amos. "Come on," she said with a smile. "Today is the beginning of something special." As they walked onto the expansive green field, Amos couldn't help but feel the weight of his choice. He knew his life would never be the same. At the Greenfield restaurant, Amos and Clara sat under the soft glow of outdoor lights, sipping wine as the hours passed. Clara was lively and talkative, sharing stories of her life, her successes, and her vision for the company. Amos, though still uneasy, found himself drawn into her charm, occasionally smiling at her humor or nodding to her insights. As night fell, Clara leaned closer to Amos. "Let's not end the night here," she said with a mischievous smile. "I've arranged a place nearby where we can stay and continue our celebration." Amos hesitated, but Clara's persistence was unyielding. Moments later, they left the restaurant, walking to a nearby luxury apartment Clara had rented. Inside, the ambience was lavish, with soft music playing and the scent of fresh roses filling the air. The night unfolded with laughter, conversation, and shared intimacy. Clara's laughter echoed in the apartment, mingling with Amos's occasional chuckles. By the time dawn arrived, their night of passion and happiness had been heard by the neighbors in adjacent rooms. Meanwhile, back home, Diana, Amos's wife, was restless. Her husband had never failed to come home after work, and his absence that night filled her with dread. She tried calling his phone repeatedly, but it was switched off. Could he have been in an accident? Or worse, kidnapped? Diana thought, pacing their small living room. Her heart raced with worry, and she barely slept, praying for his safe return. At the rented apartment, Amos woke up early, guilt gnawing at him. Clara, however, was in high spirits, humming a tune as she got ready to leave. "It's the weekend, Amos," she said, smiling at him. "Go home and rest. Monday, we'll continue our journey together." Amos nodded, his thoughts heavy as they left the apartments separately. He knew he would have to face Diana and the questions that awaited him. When Amos reached home, the sun was just rising. He opened the door to find Diana standing in the living room, her arms crossed and her face a mixture of relief and anger. "Amos," she began, her voice trembling, "where have you been? I was worried sick. Your phone was off all night. What happened?" Amos took a deep breath, bracing himself for the storm of questions he knew he deserved.